But still, we're just eating eggs and drinking raw milk, our own animal proteins, chickens, beef, pork.
God kind of moved us out of the city into the country. And then we began this new life.
You know, there's no cream in Dairy Queen.
There's no dairy.
There is no dairy in Dairy Queen.
I would say about 85% of our customers are on a serious health journey.
Food should be your medicine. And so you should make that a part of your budget. Getting to know your rancher, shake his hand or her hand, and you'll never have beef or food insecurity.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Sovereign Health Podcast. My name is Andy Schoonover, and we're on a mission to inspire radical personal responsibility for both the financial and physical aspects of your health. We get the joy of hosting thought leaders who are reimagining how healthcare is delivered. Today, we're excited to have Ann and Weldon Warren on the pod. They are ranchers from Lubbock, Texas that raise grass-fed, grass-finished beef in addition to chickens and pigs, and they have escaped the food industrial complex. We're excited to have them on the pod. Ann and Warren, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for coming.
You're welcome.
You're welcome. And it's Weldon Warren, just so
Weldon,
your listeners.
Warren. Ann and Weldon Warren. You have one of those names that either name could be your last name or a first name for that.
It's true. It's true. We struggled that all our life. So yes.
Well, it's either that or you have a last name like me, which is Schoonover, which nobody can pronounce. It's nearly impossible. Well, we first met down in Nashville, or up in Nashville, I guess I should say. The Meat Mafia guys had an awesome little convocation with like-minded folks, and you know the story that you told about your background and some of the health problems that you were going through, Weldon. It just was super compelling. So I'd love to hear that story again for our listeners.
Okay. Well, I will try to summarize and hit the highlights, and can fill in some of the detail if that's needed. Basically, at the age of 45, I had a stroke. And because of my experience in healthcare in college, I recognized what I was having as it was happening. And so surviving a pretty serious stroke and having a body that really was resilient and bounced back quickly with very little effects still, exhibiting themselves today. I felt very fortunate. The long story short is we felt this was God's way of telling us that he wanted us to move away from the financial services where I was a money manager of airline pilot money and back to the farm to live a life as much as I could, similar to my grandfather, as opposed to my dad, who was a conventional farmer, meaning conventional. He had finally rolled over into Monsanto and Bayer crop science using glyphosate, synthetic fertilizer on the row crop. My goal was to mimic what my granddad had done, who, by the way, lived to be 95 and only spent one day in the hospital after a fender bender after church with a parishioner. It broke a rib, so they took him to the hospital, taped up his ribs, and he knew that's all they could do for him. So he snuck out in the middle of the night out of the hospital and went home and went back to work. Since that happened on a Sunday, the next day was a work day. Monday, he wanted to be at work. And that was the extent of his healthcare cost.
That wasn't even a full day at the hospital. It was like a half day at the hospital.
Yeah.
The only things he had in his medicine cabinet, that's what you called them back in those days, was a tin can of Excedrin. Back in the days when you could buy the little tin can, pop the corner, and it would pop open the top. He knew what detoxing was before the word detox had been really brought to the forefront. He knew to sweat every day. He sweated out a shirt. He didn't have a vehicle. The pickup and the car for the family did not have air conditioners in them. And here we are in West Texas, where our summers are extremely hot and our winters are extremely cold. He somehow knew to sweat and that was a good thing. And of course, they ate off the farm. They had a fairly good size 1 acre garden. We had a pretty good size orchard. We had the raspberry, blackberry bushes. My grandmother was really fond of her grape arbor. So she grew and canned a lot of grape jelly. And they lived a very simple life. They ate their own beef, pork, chicken, raw milk. They didn't make cheese. But anyway, they lived off that farm and was pretty much carnivore most of their life. I mean, we ate eggs every day. And to this day, I eat 2 to 3 over easy eggs every day. My wife does such a great job of dressing that up, with all the garnishments. But still, we're just eating eggs and drinking raw milk cheese, our own animal proteins, chickens, beef, pork. And so making this story longer than short, the stroke was pretty serious. The doctor showed me my scan and said, well, here's what your future looks like. We're going to have you on 4 prescriptions for the rest of your life. Yes, that'll have all kinds of implications as to how it impacts many different aspects of your life. And he said, and then, at some point in the near future, we're probably going to need to put in a stent in the left carotid, then a stent in the right carotid. Eventually, we'll do a bypass like my dad did. My dad ended up having 2 bypasses 10 years apart. Who knows how much that really cost back in those days, but it was significant. And farmers don't always have the best insurance. So we could see what the future looked like. This cardiologist drew it out pretty well. And so I said to him, so what could food have to do with my having a stroke? And this Texas Tech, educated at the medical school here at Tech, cardiologist said, food has absolutely nothing to do with your health. So it's like, okay, maybe I need a new cardiologist, which we did. And we have a great relationship with an integrative doctor here in Lubbock, Texas. And, we go to him about once, maybe twice a year. We get our blood work done. So several years after the stroke, we had the opportunity through our church to have a scan, basically, to see how we were progressing. And the woman that was conducting or administering the scan said, okay, you told me you had a stroke, and I'm just not seeing any blockage in your...
in his carotids. He was 50% blocked in both carotids.
Wow.
And all 6 arteries of the heart. And so that lady said, I'm not seeing it. In fact, these really look like 30-year-old veins. And it was such an odd comment because I think you had just hit 50.
Yeah.
And so we were like, wow. So
anyways, this is 5 years after the stroke.
5 years after the stroke, 5 years of...
Wow.
And we pretty much... So the stroke came right after 9/11. And when, anyways, the financial market tanked. And so there was a lot of stress obviously involved. But we were that very typical family eating a standard American diet. The Meat Mafia loves for me to share this little tidbit that Weldon just kind of blows over. But when he did know he was having a stroke, and he was very communicative, even though half his face was kind of sliding and he was very slurred in his speech. He's like, this is what's happening. You've got to drive me to the hospital. I'm like, okay, well, they have terrible food. Let's just grab something quick and we'll get to the hospital. So we get there and they look at, draw blood and look at his triglycerides, and he was off the chart. They said, man, if I didn't know any better, I'd say you just had eaten a Big Mac. And I looked at him, this doctor, in my truly at that point in my life, innocence, and said, why is a Whopper just as bad? So I literally drove my husband through Burger King drive-thru on the way to the hospital while he's having a stroke. So I was that person. So we've come a long way.
Yeah, that's incredible.
So, I haven't eaten a Whopper since.
No, we have nor Big Macs. So there you go. So we radically changed, and God kind of moved us out of the city into the country. And then we began this new life that we never went to college for, never dreamed of doing, although Weldon definitely has the ag background.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. And the joke is, when we're moving to the country out of the city after this big traumatic stroke and this thing that happened in our life financially, we kind of just dove down, took a big hit from 9/11. And they were just like, so I know Weldon was raised in the country. So are you too? You were raised at the country? And I said, well, the country club, does that count?
Well, then
I told her,
I'm curious, what was your favorite meal pre-stroke? Like, what was your go-to meal pre-stroke?
well,
Or there's that famous question, like, what would be your last, meal on earth, pre-stroke, and now what is your, what would be your last meal on earth? How did that change, if at all?
Good question.
that is a very good question, and no one has ever asked us that.
I know, that's a great question.
So my pre-stroke good meal might have included the artificial Dairy Queen ice cream. There's no cream in Dairy Queen.
There's no dairy.
There is no dairy in Dairy Queen. It's all synthetic. So, Warren Buffett's a big friend of Bill Gates, and they're both on the synthetic bandwagon. But Dairy Queen's been that way for its entire history. So, but all those things, we ate very conventionally: white buns, grain-finished beef, nothing organic. Who would want to pay extra for something clean when you didn't know there was really a difference? And thanks to our organic labeling, there's a pretty blurred line between what's really organic and what is not, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. But we would have eaten very conventionally on that last meal, had a great time, a lot of seasoning, MSG, all the things that give you extra flavor. And that's a very different meal than we would eat today. And I kind of eat my last meal 2 to 3 times a day now, because I never know if Dad's going to say, okay, you're coming home and I'm going to just fall flat. If I don't go to the hospital, I don't want to be resuscitated. I don't want to have any surgeries. When he's ready to take me, I'm willing to go. And so my last meal would be something that my wife would cook. It might be a New York strip with sauteed onions. She is a wonderful cook.
Aww.
And uses really good spices. And of course, we are believers in avocado oil, coconut oil, anything, tallow and lard we cook with, which my grandmother did. So all we're doing is eating exactly the way my grandparents ate.
Yeah.
And a good contrast is my parents went to Tech. They got educated at Tech. My dad did in animal science, which was a complete bastardization of animal welfare and animal husbandry compared to what my granddad did. Mm-hmm. And my granddad, he ate off that farm. When a cow didn't have a calf, he ate the cow. It's like, you're still on my farm, you're going to become part of the food chain. And my dad got taught at Tech, pull up your best steer calf that weighs 700 pounds and finish him out on grain and soy and Milo, spend quite a bit of money getting him finished. And then he sold his open heifer that could have been slaughtered almost as free meat for the freezer. He would sell at the sell barn for pennies on the dollar for what it was really worth, because that's kind of the way this market works for these ranchers. And so my dad never finished his own animals to eat, even though we had Black Angus in the pasture. Even the good ones, they were registered Black Angus, and we never ate them. It's like, well, we did the steers because we grain finished them, but I mean any of those that didn't have a calf. And so basically what was really easy for us as we walked pretty slowly through this new journey was to remember and adapt to how my grandparents lived their life, how they ate, how they lived their life, how they enjoyed, like we're Catholic. So, she likes a good glass of wine. And almost every night I have a small glass of scotch. And that is our routine today, is to eat well, eat clean. And hopefully they're always going to be my animals, because we sell a lot of animals. We might as well eat some of our own.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're here today. And the scan at the church showed that there was no blockage. And I sent that to my old cardiologist in Denton, where we were living. And he said, well, food didn't have anything to do with this. That was a miracle. And I said, okay, I'll take that. It was a miracle. God, this space, I will walk that road. But you have a choice in life. You're going to either buy into all this modern food system and put your health at risk to support the conventional food system, big ag, or you're going to kind of be, I don't know, you're isolated to some degree when you say, I'm going to walk to the beat of a different drummer.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I've done for 22 years now. And I'm not at all worried about, when my day is coming. God already knows that. And, we'll just go with it from there and all my friends that are my classmates, we're losing them fairly quickly now, since COVID and through COVID. Quite a few have died and are in poor health now. And so we just feel very fortunate that God enlightened us, and it's a really easy road to walk. That's what's amazing, is eating clean is easier, I think, than eating unclean, because rarely do we go out to a restaurant, but most Americans eat out very regularly at a restaurant. So you go through the whole thing, you got to get reservations, you get seated, and you go through all that. And, I'm home most of the time with my wife, go to the farm every once in a while, and we sit down to eat at least 2 and more often 3 meals a day. And most of the product comes from organic farmers in our neighborhood and area. And then, our beef, pork, chicken, protein, cheeses, raw milk. Have you ever drank any brown-hided A2 raw milk?
I don't know if I have. Delicious?
Oh.
It's like liquid ice cream. It's so creamy.
It's liquid ice cream. It's very thick with the cream. Our gallons come to us. He makes a delivery once a week, and about a fourth of that gallon will separate where the cream's on top. We just shake up the gallon and pour a glass, and it's so good. And so thankfully we're able to source that. We had our own Jersey dairy cow for 10 years when we lived in the Possum Kingdom area around Graham, and then since moved to Lubbock and have found a Jersey dairyman here in our area to buy from.
So what, why do you, I imagine people are listening to this and they're saying, wow, Weldon had a really difficult mid-40s, changed lifestyle, and now is clear of all of the bad stuff that happened before the 40s. And you kind of made a joke, but I think it's probably somewhat true. Like, it could be a miracle, or it could be because of your lifestyle, right? And so, how do you compellingly, other than just share your story, which is a compelling story, and that's why I love having you guys on. But like, how do you be the to use a biblical term, how are you being Paul, on the road trying to show people the benefits of this lifestyle, other than just having a story of one? Are there other things that you have found that you can tell people that they're like, oh, bing, 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 this light goes off, that the food that we're eating on a day-to-day basis is causing significant harm to our bodies? Are there other things that really stick with folks?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So when, like I said, our business isn't something we went to school for. We didn't dream about, hey, I'm going to grow up and be a grass-fed beef rancher. And so, but God has put us in this space. And along with putting us in this space comes, I would say, about 85% of our customers are on a serious health journey. So we have had about 85% of our people sharing their own stories, just like Weldon. And then people cross our path and say, I have ulcerative colitis. What do you know? And I said, I've got a customer that did this, and try the GAPS diet. And here's a great book. And here's a great practitioner. And other than that, even inside of our own family, of course, Weldon was an adult male, but God, it's so funny. We're like, what are you doing, Lord? But right now we've sort of inherited our 4 grandchildren, ages 1, 3, 5, and 7. I can tell you it's a younger woman's game. We are exhausted.
To say the least.
But when they came to us, they were pretty sickly and had always been sickly. As much as we tried to intervene, as much as we tried to say, this is what we know, feed them this way, etc., The parents just couldn't get it together to feed them correctly. So all the kids had always snobby noses, always underweight, always sluggish mental,
circles under
acuity.
the eyes.
Yeah. In school, the teachers were like, they're just staring. They don't really pay attention. So we've had them since March, but more specifically, even just since the beginning of July this year, full time with us. And you should hear the teachers just rave about,
wow.
I didn't even know they had that personality. I didn't even know that they were this way. And it is such a joy. Our little 1-year-old, when he first came to us in March, we actually thought he was kind of autistic because he was just so like dumbed down, didn't make a lot of eye contact, wasn't smiling. Now this kid is hilariously walking around the house, yelling, screaming, happy, the happiest little baby you've ever seen. The 3, 5, and 7-year-olds are all involved in athletics like gymnastics and basketball and ballet, and but they eat super clean. In fact, right now they're still in public school. We're probably going to take them out, but right now they're in public school. So we actually sent our own bag of snacks because kids have to have snacks. And yes, there are snacks available at Costco that have no sugar, that are fruit only, or that are just like beef sticks. We have our own beef sticks. We send our kids with our own jerky, things along that line. And so we were asking the teachers, keep them off the mainstream food and allow them to go to their own snack bag. And these 4 kids, there's no runny noses. They have beautiful skin. Their eyes are bright. Family is saying, wow, they're not ashen gray anymore. And so we have another story coming right up that God's strangely blessing us with, that we can share, that it's not just for grownups. Like kids need to really be focused on eating clean as well. But really in fact, we'll tell that once. We've got 2 really compelling stories that are beautiful. One, this sweet lady from our church, she started going to an integrative medicine doctor here in Lubbock, and he referred her to buy our beef. So she started buying our beef. She goes, I didn't even know you did this, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, she couldn't turn a doorknob or open or hold a coffee cup. She just couldn't do any of that. The arthritis was so bad and swollen. And she was probably in her early 60s at that time. And she started eating our beef and started eating a more, not paleo, but a
carnivore,
old school traditional, more, I guess paleo is a fair enough word, paleo kind of lifestyle. And within a month, really 3.5 weeks max, she just was like, look, Weldon, look what I can do. And she was opening our door and turning it and say, look, I can carry this box myself. She was a completely different person within a very short amount of time. I have a friend that has ulcerative colitis. It took him about 3.5 months. So when you'll read, you'll be fine in 20 days. Keep going, because if it doesn't happen, it will happen. We didn't have any scans. We don't know if it took that full 5 years for Weldon's arteries to actually clean and get clear, or if it really happened within the year, because we just didn't do those scans. So we don't know exactly. But even if it took all 5 years, it was so worth it, because he's a picture of health. 68, almost 68. I'm 60. Neither of us are on any medications at all. Obviously, we've got enough energy to raise these 4 little kids. So I don't know what's going on with that. Another really neat story. I'm going to jump in here with these phrases that we use all the time with people. It's really true. Food should be your medicine, and not let medicine be your food. Yes.
If you want to really hear that again, it's food should be your medicine. And so you should make that a part of your budget. Who knows what the average family in the United States spends on medical care, pharmaceuticals. If they took those dollars and focused on clean food, they wouldn't even need that medication, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And would tell, how much they'd have to spend on healthcare. But God really designed our bodies very perfectly. The immune system is an amazing thing. But you have to take care of it. You have to feed it correctly. You have to respect it. And without that, then you're leaving it up to, unconventional devices. The medical system, modern medicine is unconventional. Conventional is eating your own apples, your own eggs, your own chickens. That's conventional. I really say that what my granddad did was very modern in that time, because modern in the sense of he used what he had. He didn't rely on the grocery store. He just did it himself. And so for me to come back into that space as a rancher, raising this beef, we sell to Whole Foods. We sell now to Thousand Hills, which sells to many other grocery store chains. And to know that more and more people are eating clean is very rewarding, for me.
Yes.
It's kind of the pinnacle of my career to be trying to get other young men to do what I'm doing. In fact, right before this call with you, there's a young gentleman from the Panhandle who was over at White Oak Pastures in Bluffton, Georgia, doing an internship. And he calls me about once a week, and he has written down 4 or 5 questions. He go, okay, Weldon, so how would you do this, this, and this? And so mentoring a young 20-something-year-old who really wants to do this for the rest of his life is just so rewarding. That's not where I was at his age, obviously. I wanted to be a Wall Street money manager, did that, and then you realize that type of success might not keep you alive.
Yeah.
You might be successful and still die at the age of 45, which is easily what could have happened to me.
Do you see a change in the generations? I mean, you spoke about I think it was your grandfather. He lived a great lifestyle, had a half a day in the hospital. Your dad sounds like he had pretty significant medical issues. You were on that trajectory, and thank God got turned around by a specific health event. Do you feel like the generations kind of coming after you are more aware of this? Are they more kind of psyoped by the big food, food industrial complex? Or do you see kind of the wave coming in our direction, or is the tide coming in, or is the tide coming out from your perspective?
Good question. And I'll let Ann jump in after my comment. But I think the younger generations are embracing clean eating more so than my generation, and even the couple of generations after me have embraced it. Those people, especially farmers that grew up and got educated in the traditional ag system, where you got an ag degree and they taught you to spray glyphosate and bare crop science herbicides on your crop and use synthetic fertilizers, are the ones that will never break free of that. They're just too embedded in the system. But our daughter and son-in-law and even our kids are much cleaner eaters at their age of, let's say, 30-something than we were at 30-something. So I have hope for
you may have something to do with that.
That's true. So I'm going to jump in and say it seems to be one extreme or the other. And so our daughter-in-law just doesn't buy any of this, which is why we have her children right now. So, she just thinks donuts are food and that should be fine. Pop-Tarts are real. And, she doesn't, no matter, we have a story, we have depth of other people's stories. We have natural health doctors that we're very involved with, success after success. And some people just say no. They just can't buy it. And so that, and I even see that at the school, like all those teachers, they're so amazingly good-hearted, but they're also so blind as they pass out lollipop after lollipop when you did good and you rewarded with sugar. And it's like, stop doing that. Let's reward with gold stars and just, so there's some people that are so want to be such good servants, but they're missing the mark. And then, but then there is, like Weldon said, yes, our children, even my son that's married to my daughter-in-law knows and believes and will eat healthy, but he falls a lot because of his wife. So he doesn't stay the course. And so that's really a struggle for him to stay the course. But the other, our other kids, so we've had a couple young college kids come and help us work for us. And when they realize what it is they're working for and what they're actually doing, they just get very hungry for that knowledge. And they'll pick Weldon's brain and they'll ask us about food. And one of ours now has, this gentleman has actually become a full-time employee for us. And he's so funny. He had several dinner parties at his home, and people would it was like kind of a potluck. Everybody brings stuff over. Well, one young friend of his came over with a big bottle of canola oil and said, I'm going to prepare these. Get that out of my house. Get that out of my house. It shouldn't even be in my. And so it was really, really kind of sweet. And then he thus educated that crowd about why he freaked out when canola oil entered his home. So,
that's funny.
And I love hearing that story. So I do think that those who are swaying that way sway very much towards health food. They really want to get all that knowledge, and they're really willing to be committed. And being in Austin, you are so blessed. You've got, places like Ziki that refuse to use any seed oils. And I mean, they're phenomenal. Just go there, get your food, and it's phenomenal. You feel great afterwards. So, you with that restaurant scene and people just eating local, and that in West Texas, 90% of and we have a lot of restaurants, but 90% of them are just chain restaurants.
Yeah.
They're just days and all those. So we don't quite have that same food scene. So Weldon's right. We eat at home a lot.
You mentioned earlier, and it was super interesting that you had a friend from church who went to an integrative doctor, and he said, you need to have beef from your ranch.
Right.
And so can you walk me through what is the day in the life of a holy cow look like? Why is it that the holy cow is different than the cows that we're seeing on the shelves of our local, HEB or other kind of grocery store?
That's a great question. And if every consumer could see with their eyes what they're going to hear from my mouth, they might change their eating habits. So America is a great country, but we're dominated by crony capitalism, and that is the making of money. And normally, if you try to get an edge by making money, you're in the process of making money, you're going to try to find an angle, a lower cost business model. So feeding government subsidized corn, milo, and soy to these animals is to keep Americans' food costs down with cheap food. That's our agricultural program. We're going to subsidize it with tax dollars. We're going to oversupply the market on corn, soy, and Milo. The crop prices drop dramatically because you've overplanted. And so the government steps in and says, so now we'll subsidize the farmer because we encouraged them to grow the crop. We've got to subsidize them. So your tax dollars go to what I call the welfare farmer, who's growing for the government to provide it to the feedlots at a cheaper price so that their hamburger and their steak at the grocery store will be cheaper, rather than the opposite angles saying everyone needs to be eating clean, organic, these micro farms that we're beginning to see pop up again are coming about because we used to be agrarian. Our grandparents knew how to raise cattle and grow their own gardens and orchards and all of that, their own chickens. And then we all moved to town, abandoned the farm. We all started getting sick. We're the sickest developed country in the world. We have the most heart attacks, the most cancer. It's just, and it's a prescription,
obesity,
literally.
Diabetes, list goes on and on.
And that's a prescription for the pharmaceutical business model. If they don't want you to die, they just want to live off of you for as long as possible. And to break away from that mold, you've got to get your legislators to be more innovative with supporting the agrarian business model so that they can feed. We need to have 20 holy cow beefs around Lubbock to feed Lubbock,
right?
And 50 of those around Dallas-Fort Worth to feed them. So we're feeding local, and then it will make a change. But so you ask what is in the life of holy cow happy? That's what we call our cows. They're holy cow happy. They're on something green, almost green every day. So we have a cool season growing period and a warm season growing period. In between those two seasons, we might be feeding hay that used to be green because it was grass that was cut into, we made hay bales. But they're in the sun every day. They're drinking clean water. They're free to roam and exercise. And believe it or not, cattle are very feisty. They're out there with their tails up in the air, running around. Not all the time, but I mean, they're much more mobile than you would think. And so they're just moving around a lot and drinking water, eating every day. They cool down every night. So it might be 103 here in Lubbock today. And tonight it'll be 71 or 72. And so those cattle do most of their grazing at nighttime when it's cool. They fill that big rumen with forage. And then during the day, the next day, they're going to lay down and regurgitate and chew the cud to refine it. You know, they're just breaking it down even more and making that protein available. And so what makes a holy cow happy is all they want to eat is protein. When they're eating corn and milo, which is a starch, their rumen is very acidic. And that's what's the problem with the feedlots. Every cow, every animal in a feedlot is on a short destination to death because every one of them will die over if they're left in there too long. So the job of a feedlot is to market their cattle to be processed, cut into, cuts, steaks and roast and all that before the animal dies. That's the whole goal.
Yeah.
And they all have a pretty high mortality rate. If you get too high, you're losing money. If you can keep it down pretty low, then you'll make money. But they're all on their way to death. My cattle could, the average life of a cow could be 20-something years. Dairy cattle can be very long. So our business model is built around using the animals that are not fertile. They're not going to have another calf, and turning that animal into steaks and ground beef because they're not producing anymore. If they're not productive on a ranch, you're not going to keep the animal around. And so that's how our business model works, is just cows that aren't having calves turn into our food supply.
And so let's contrast that then to a feedlot. What does a feedlot look like? They're not running around with their tails up in the air. What does that look like?
Well, if they're walking up to the feed trough, there's going to be hundreds of animals at that same feed trough, and they're sharing nasal discharge. So it's a pretty contaminated eating environment. They're crowded. They're standing shoulder to shoulder in the sun. The feedlots might have irrigation sprayers to mist the air, which when moisture goes through there, it cools it off, and so to make the environment cooler. But buffalo used to roam freely on the West Texas plains. Our cattle are stepping, walking, grazing, going to water every day. So we're trying to mimic that model as closely as possible, as opposed to the feedlot where the feed truck comes along with bubble gum, cardboard, corn, milo, soy in every day. And this animal just gets fatter and fatter. So, and the animal is literally getting sicker and sicker. And the goal is to process it before it dies. And so there's a pretty awful stench to their discharge. If you ever drive by a feedlot and you have your windows down and the wind is out of the correct direction, you're going to smell it. You can walk amongst our cattle on the ranch. When they're defecating, there is no smell. In fact, there is a little bit of an odor, but it's a little bit of a sweet odor. And in the wintertime, it's wheat, rye, oats, triticale, and that's actually got a very sweet aroma to it. It's not pungent at all.
Right.
The pungent comes from the horrific environment and being sick. That rumen is upset.
So there's this grass versus grain finished, I guess, debate, right?
Yeah.
And yours is grass finished, correct?
Yes, sir. 100% of its life.
Yeah. And so what is your thoughts behind that? Why do you not grain finish your happy cows?
Because I'd bet money there's no feedlots in heaven.
Probably not.
So if you go to like anthropologists that have, studied historically Paleolithic people and ancestral eating styles, they find that as long as that agrarian community was consuming 1 omega-3 to up to 4 omega-6s in their diet, that they had no autoimmune diseases. There's no history of Crohn's, of colitis. There's no history of diabetes, any of those
Lupus.
that we just take for granted, like, oh, it's just my turn to get this next disease.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you go ahead and test animals such as ours that have been on the feed, and ours get tested randomly because of being certified. They get random. Not every single animal gets tested, but they do get tested to make sure that our omega-3s and conjugated linoleic acid, all of those things are falling in line with a true grass-finished animal, born on grass, ate grass their whole life, and finished on grass. And we test out to be about 1 omega-3 to 3 omega-6s. Generally speaking, that's a grass-finished animal. When we always do good, better, best. That's the best beef you can get, is a grass-finished animal. Then you can go to what is the next step down, or considered better than grocery store. It's a pastured animal that is finished on grain, meaning they still bring the big troughs out, but they're out in pasture so that cattle can still roam, but they pretty much eat their grain bed down and they don't roam as much as you would think. And those animals are testing out at about 1 omega-3 to 20 omega-6s, dramatically different, even though the animal welfare is so good, even though they're treated really well, it's a good eating experience. Those ranchers, they don't understand the science behind, why do I want to eat grass finished? They see that during drought, during other things, they have a lot more control to feed them out. So they feel that their animal welfare trumps that. But then you go to the feedlot and the animals are testing out of the feedlot 1 omega-3 to 50 omega-6s. They don't have any access to green grass, generally speaking. They're completely stressed out, which also elevates some of those numbers. So anyways, that's the science behind it. And
I'm going to share a little bit more science. I hope these numbers are accurate in my memory. But we're after 1 omega-3 to maybe at the most 4 omega-6s. When you put an animal into the feedlot, the decline of their omega-3s, their conjugated linoleic acid, their vitamin E, there are 4 or 5 major health components that are on a very steep decline curve. They'll lose roughly 85% of the omega-3s, the vitamin E, the conjugated linoleic acid over a 90-day period. So they're all kept in there at least 90 days.
It financially doesn't pencil out for them to be fed less than 90 days. Even the ones that finish in the pasture, they tout for the last 90 days we've fed them. And it's like, why are they doing that? But anyways, that's us.
All the cattle going into a feedlot came out of a pasture. All the animals born and raised in the United States are born and raised in a pasture. So they are grass finished at that moment in time. Right. Then they're shipped to the feedlot, and over the next 120 days, they're fed. And it only takes 90 days to lose 85% of the nutritional value of the animal.
It's crazy. It's insane.
And thus, it's a lower price.
Right.
And of course, their corn, milo, and soybeans were below market price because the government has incentivized the feedlots to provide red meat to Americans. The most common reason for having a revolution is lack of food. And that's what our government's always trying to, prevent.
Right.
So what you're saying is with grass finished, the omega-3 to omega-6 ratio is significantly better than grain finished and feedlot, way better than both of those. Right. Is there kind of physiological studies that have shown that this imbalance of omega-3s and 6s does lead to X, Y, and Z, conditions? You kind of talked about autoimmune conditions. It sounds like that imbalance causes autoimmune conditions. Is that kind of the primary driver, or the primary conditions in which it impacts, or does it kind of, I guess autoimmune impacts everything. So I guess I'm trying to figure out, like, what is the kind of physiological outcome of having this mismatch in what you're eating?
Well, we're probably not the best ones to share the science behind that, but you eat fish maybe because you like fish, but most people eat it because they get a lot of omega-3s.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the way they balance their diet. They're going to eat some saltwater or freshwater fish, and they get a lot of omega-3s in that. And you can get almost the same amount from cattle. And maybe you don't want to do that only because you enjoy fish. But God knew what he was doing when he set up this system for us to live in. Most of the earth is covered in water. What's in the water? Fish. And then the rest is Mother Earth, the dirt that we have to live on. And almost everything that has a root in the ground is going to be green. It's the chloroplast that makes chlorophyll green in a plant's leaf that is the protein that the animal is after. So cattle grazing before mankind was ever here, they were eating tree leaves and grasses and various forages, and that fed their body. The buffalo is an example that kept the Indians alive. And so we just are trying to make sure our cattle are able to exercise a lot. Then they have green grasses or forage to graze in the winter and the summer. And that produces a really healthy product for our customers to consume. And then life goes pretty well with you. Your hormones are balanced better. Doesn't mean you don't need to go to your doctor and have your physical in your checkup. But when you eat correctly, most of the things going on in your body with a very complex system that we have are kind of in autopilot. They know what they're doing. They know how to feed your body. Everything gets converted. You're feeding the mitochondria. That's the little engine that creates energy in your body. You've got to feed the mitochondria correctly. If you don't, then all kinds of things start going wrong. And that's not a discussion I'm qualified to really have at a deeper level. But all I know is God set this up. Most of the earth is water and there's fish in there. All that has land has something green growing on it. And the cattle, the goats, the sheep, the pigs can make a living grazing outside, getting sun, vitamin D. I mean, most of us are vitamin D
deficient.
Deficient in the wintertime. And that's why we have the flu season. And then you have people like Fauci trying to take advantage of that with COVID. There's many very simple therapeutic ways of dealing with COVID without having to get a vaccine. And I'm not trying to make some of the people listening, angry, but we've dealt with COVID very easily here using hydrogen peroxide, but there's ivermectin, there's hydroxychloroquine, and those are very safe ways to deal with it as opposed to the vaccine. And so we're not doing the mRNA, just if your customers might be asking that. That's going to be primarily for the feedlots because that's such a toxic, nasty environment for those cattle to be in. But holy cow beef will never administer an mRNA vaccine.
So any other hormones or antibiotics or anything that you all use on your cows?
No, sir.
No.
So that's a good question. We do intervene. Our medicinal protocol with our cattle is we are out with those cattle almost daily, certainly every other day. Our ranch manager is riding through a herd, and he's looking for that one animal whose ears are a little bit droopy. It's just like when you look at your kids, you can tell if they're getting a cold, their eyes are red, their nose is runny. Same thing with cattle. And so when he sees one, he's got 2 medicines, if you want to call them medicines, in his saddlebag. He's going to rope the back legs of that animal, pull it down very gently. She just lays down. He's going to walk up and give her a shot of B12 and another shot of Banamine, which is an aspirin. The next day, he's going to go look for that same ear tag number, find her, and she's normally going to be okay. 50% of the time, they bounce back within 1 day of that B12. And then of the other 50%, we have to watch for a few more days. And if they continue to digress, then he's going to finally rope her and give her a shot of antibiotic and put a red tag in her ear so she's demarcated that we can identify her. We'll let the antibiotic withdrawal period go by, and then we'll sell her to the sell barn, and she's going to become part of the meat supply down the road, but it won't be grass finished.
But it's to be honest, it's so far and few between. Our cattle just aren't healthy.
I can tell you that statistic. We have an average of 0.25% of our animals that have to be doctored the first time, and half of those get over it in a day. So it's only then 1/8 of our animals that will have to give a shot of antibiotic, and the rest
percent,
1/8 of 1%,
and 1%. And so that means that almost all of our animals never have to be doctored. And whereas humane as possible, when you have a really good cowboy who can pull down a big cow with one swing of the rope and get out and just give her a shot, and you pull up a tent in the skin of the neck so it's got a big airspace in between. You put the needle in, you get in their shot, you undo the noose around the neck, and off she goes. And so just having 1/8 of 1% actually get sick, and that's using also what is the highest mortality on our ranch is a lightning strike, and it's part of that 1/8. So we'll lose 3 animals at a time that are standing close together, and then storms come in, and we'll get a strike of lightning that's too close to them, and boom, it knocks all 3 of them out. It'll happen about once a year, maybe twice a year, and that's all we have. So we don't apply any pesticides, herbicides on our crops. Those cattle are only eating something green that didn't have any additives to it. Right. So we don't spray our crop.
Right.
Cow manure is the best fertilizer in the world. Well,
so
chicken manure is probably the best.
I think people watching this will be like, this is a no-brainer. They're going to go online and they're going to say, okay, grass-fed versus grain-fed, and the number one thing that comes up is how does it taste? And so, what is your kind of rebuttal to the internet, marketing, probably from the food industrial complex, that says that these cows just don't taste good? What is your rebuttal to that?
Well, first of all, they taste different compared to where they're finished. So if you're going to eat a grass-finished beef that's been finished in Maine versus Southern California, they're going to be very different, just like a fine wine. And so I would say try another grass-finished beef. If that, like crabgrass is actually a great finishing, but it actually has a flavor that some people don't enjoy. They don't think it's very palatable. So we're lucky. The mineral content out here in West Texas, when we finish our cattle, it's just a really robust, beefy flavor. So we actually don't get those complaints that you're talking about. But we absolutely heard them before we entered this industry and before it became our livelihood. And people also, how do you combat the yellow fat? It's too unsightly. You have to go really, white bread and white fat are both, not good. You don't want all that washing out. You want that deep, rich red color of the beef and the yellow fat.
It's the omega-3s in the fat that make it yellow,
right?
To some degree. So what flavors grass is the mineral composition, as what Ann said. It's the grasses themselves. Winter grasses have a higher protein than summer grasses. The more protein that's in the forage, the stronger the flavor profile. Our customers very regularly vote that their best beef that they enjoyed the most was from our winter grazing. They got more protein in the meat, and it enhances the flavor profile. So we'll always say it's a pretty strong and robust flavor profile. It's beefy. Well, what does beefy mean? But it is. It's beefy. It's stronger. And grain-fed beef has no flavor, and hence that is why they had to invent Heinz 57 and A1 sauce and all these sauces, because your beef didn't have any flavor. Well, when you eat true grass-finished beef, you don't want anything on that first bite, so you can taste it. And then if you want to add salt and pepper to it, that'll bring out a little bit more flavor. The salt does that. But we don't eat any. I mean, we do all kinds of dishes. She has all kinds of rubs, for a fancy dinner. But day in and day out, it's salt and pepper.
Right.
Love it.
The beef is flavor, and you're going to love it. It's just going to be really robust and very kind of a stronger flavor than grain finished.
Now, it does cook differently. So a lot of people will say, oh, I didn't like that. That was too tough. Or my roast didn't fall apart. And I'm like, okay, let me help you. And so just been doing this long enough that I can perfectly cook any one of our cuts, and I can walk you through how to do that, because it's like skirt steak. It's a very difficult cut. It used to just be thrown into the grind, but come along the Tex-Mex restaurants and lots of chemical tenderizers, and they popularized the fajita with a very tough piece of meat. And then you come to us who are purists, and we cut that, and I sell out of it every single month. There are people who know how to cook it and can do it perfectly. But when I have a new customer saying, I want some fajita meat, I always say, okay, let's not do skirt. Let's start you on sirloin, because that's a true steak, and here's what you want to do. And so just kind of holding people's hand as to how to cook stuff. And the roast, you just need to give it all day. Just give me 8 to 10 hours if you can do that.
Sure.
It's going to be amazing. It's going to be the best roast ever.
It'll be the best au jus in our crock pot. We always say that when you're finished eating all the meat, then you're going to want to consume all the au jus that's left in that crock pot. And that is the most flavorful. So we always have bread to dip the bread into the au jus, and it's just delicious. So everything of ours gets consumed. The fat, of course, and that low and slow doesn't pasteurize the meat as much as a high temperature does. So whoever invented cooking beef at 375 for 3 hours for a roast just harmed the whole country in their cooking style. My grandmother cooked it for 8 to 10 hours, but modern American women don't want to take 8 to 10 hours to cook a meal. But my wife puts it all together, and it's in the crock pot, and 8 hours later she comes back and checks on it.
Sure.
So it's not more trouble. It's just planning for when you're going to be consuming that meal. You have to put the roast in the crock pot, in the morning to eat it that night.
Yeah. Again, I think that people will walk away with this being like, we need to get grass finished beef from our local rancher. But is it expensive? Is it more expensive than going to the local? We're both in Texas, so we know HEB. But like, is it more expensive than the local HEB? And is there a place where, hey, listen, if you can't get grass finished, locally, sourced meat, what do we do? Is there a second best to this for people who don't have the resources to do that?
I would say that getting to know your rancher, shake his hand or her hand, and you'll never have beef or food insecurity. So our population within the cities actually need to migrate out a bit on these weekends and go meet people. You always want your farmer growing your vegetables not to have come from inside the city probably, but they're probably farming outside the city, and then they bring their products into you. But everyone needs to know their rancher, shake his hand, ask what his health protocols are. How does he take care of his cattle? And then you'll never have that food insecurity that COVID set us up kind of with that shock of that, maybe the grocery store shelves actually will go bare, but that's in the industrial food system. If you know your rancher, you're going to always have meat. If you know your local farmers, you're going to have watermelons and fruits and vegetables because they're going to grow them. And the more the consumer supports their local farmers, the more available all that product will be.
So the other thing, because we do a lot of coaching on various levels, and for young families or just big families, I'm always trying to remind them that our country, we have our priorities wrong. In fact, my other son has a huge car payment because he's got a sports car, and that's just where he's at in life. But he also, the way he manages his money, that's not the best example, but you've got to buy that used car so you can put that money into good food. Buy used clothing. The used clothing market out there is phenomenal. There's even online used clothing now. So you can, don't go into Dillard's and drop $50 on a blouse. Go find a $10 blouse that someone else has worn before that's in perfect shape, and take that $40 and put it towards good food. So are we more expensive? Yes. Are we worth it? Yes. Is your health worth it? Yes. So we haven't spent a lot of medical dollars on Weldon or myself all these years, but we have spent our money on really, really high quality food. For us, it's been phenomenal because we're enjoying health. And how do you put a price on that? Our next door neighbor, and we've been living here, I guess, about 8 years. And so they know what we do. And every Christmas, we go give them steaks and, we drop off a pamphlet on why to eat this way. And, we've been dripping on him slowly. Well, he's just had another stroke, but this one, it was a big one. And he's our age. And their life is radically changing. He's about to have to go and live at the rehab place. He is nonverbal. He's barely able to communicate with his eyes, and that's about it. He isn't able to move one entire side of his body. When Weldon started to have all that slumping, we were able to kind of turn things around very quickly. But once you get in more in our age group, if you're not going to, if you don't have that history of eating healthy, it's a slippery slope. In fact, we're wondering if he's even going to make it. But right now, the picture that they're painting for him is just, it's really sad because they too are just on the edge of retiring, just on the edge of starting to I've worked hard all my life. I'm going to get to go fishing, go golfing, go to the beach. And now he's going to spend most of his time in rehab. And who knows if he'll really be able to be rehabilitated.
So we really need to reprioritize.
And how much money are they spending?
Yes. So we need to reprioritize the way we spend our dollars.
We really do.
We need to, in Europe, they spend about 25% of their monthly budget on food. And in the United States, we spend less than 12% of our budget on food.
And that's being generous. I would have said more like 5 or 6.
But so that's the difference. The Europeans are much healthier than we are, and we spend a whole lot more. In fact, our country spends the most per individual in healthcare costs. So to reprioritize and
2x the next country. 2 times the next country.
The next country,
so just reprioritize your dollars to eating clean and healthy.
It's
and what will surprise most consumers is how much they enjoy it eventually. Not the first time they eat grass-fed, but over time, they will enjoy it much more. And plus, we've become less social, within our own families. Like my grandparents, half the cousins met at their house for the weekend and ate dinners over there. We all ate together. Today, we all eat at fast food restaurants.
It's true.
And so they're not really
via social media.
And they're driving while they eat the hamburger to finally get home and finish their, what's that Dairy Queen product called? Soft serve.
Yeah.
Blizzards.
Blizzard, the Blizzard. Synthetic with ice in it. And, I'm always going to give Warren Buffett a hard time for ever having owned Dairy Queen. But, and then Bill Gates wants us to eat synthetic beef.
I know.
So those two peas fit in that pod very closely together.
Yeah.
So anyway.
And people need to know that whole thing about synthetic beef, but it's more than that. It's crossed over into so many different, like Hellmann's mayonnaise. I saw somebody share it on Facebook. That it's circled, but made with bioengineered products. Bioengineered products of what? It's like, I know, it's like so crazy. So it's out there. Campbell's soup, same thing. It's bioengineered products. So
we were shopping the other day. We're in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex. We're delivering beef, and I ran into a Brookshire's restaurant grocery store because we fill up there for gas, and I just wanted these Kalamata olives. You know what they are.
Yep.
The purple olives, really good, very healthy. It's an olive. Oh my gosh. Guess what it was packed in? Canola oil. Get up to the front desk at the surface desk and I said, what are y'all doing? No. Who's your buyer? You take a really healthy Kalamata olive and pack it in canola oil. Yeah. You lost me as a customer.
Man. Well, so summarize that kind of last question to y'all. Like, what do you do if you don't have enough money to do this? It is, we need to think about how expensive is it if we are in bad health versus how expensive is the steak or the chicken or the pork that is raised in a way that is aligned with the way that you guys have raised your animals. And so thank you all for what you do. You said Weldon, go and shake your farmer's hand, where can they come and shake your hand? Because you never know. After this, you might have a whole bunch of people at your front door wanting to shake your hand. So where can we find you guys, online or in real life?
Well, so online, holycowbeef.com gets you to our website. When they get to the point of wanting to order, think of that word order, then it's order at Holy Cow Beef, and then you can present an order to us. But it's really pretty easy to deal with us. We're a mom and pop shop. We might have several family members working with us, which is good. It's all family. And even Diego, who works for us, we consider him our adopted son. Yeah. He's known our other son, for years and years and years, all the way through tech. Yeah. And so now works for us. And so we're just very accessible. They can call, they can email, they can text, and we're going to respond. Someone in our office is going to respond. If they work fairly, it's not hard to reach us. If they'll just make the effort to reach us, then we're going to communicate with them, try to educate them. We're not too preachy. You can tell I'm probably the most preachy as opposed to my wife. But I'm going to say, look, it's your life. It's your health. Do you care about it? And are you willing to cut out the chips that have all the 5 or 6 different colors in it? What do you call that? Red dye, 40, yellow. Mm-hmm. I mean, these god-awful Doritos that have 6 different dyes in them. Just stay away from convenience foods. Read the labels. So we do preach about that. If it has more than 4 ingredients in it, put it back on the shelf. It's not worth your money. Yeah. So you really need to take your money and say, is this food worth my money? Right. Nutritionally.
Yeah. Amen.
And if it's not, don't buy it.
One other tip I would share for people on a budget, and I know that you're trying to wrap us up really quickly, but
no, not at all.
Is to have cooked protein on hand. Like cook those roasts and have that meat on hand, because in our American lifestyle, we're running off to basketball, running off to ballet. We're just running so much that we just grab things that are quick. Mm-hmm. And so if you have that protein on hand, you can roll it up in a slice of cheese. You can roll it, if you slice it thin, you can put cream cheese in the middle, roll that your own deli sliced meat. We do that all the time here. I will cook a roast and then deli slice it. I actually have an electric slicer. They're worth the investment. And then I put my own homemade cream cheese in it, roll it up. My granddaughter was like, can I have those meat roll-ups? They ask for them. They love them so much, and they're so healthy and fast, and it's easy. If you have cooked protein on hand, then life becomes easier. It's when you're not prepared that you're like, okay, what am I going to do? And you're scrambling and you're just having to scramble. So that's another money saving idea, is just keep cooked chicken, cooked beef, keep it cooked on hand. So,
and talking about making eating affordable, and this will be my concluding comment, you just have to set your priorities. That I would rather eat clean and pay that price for that, knowing that I'm going to get nutritional density out of the food that I eat. When our our grandkids were eating donuts for breakfast, they're hungry in an hour. Yeah. So you're eating empty calories, and there's sugar in there that arrests your immune system. Yep. Cancer feeds off sugar. Hello. And donuts are not breakfast. Right. And so we are inundated with American advertising. And we just have to ignore all that and try to eat nutritionally dense foods. And Ann and I, we learned, really early on, if we were spending X dollars per month on food, when we started eating clean, we actually spent more for the item and less total dollars, because we weren't buying chips and sodas and all the convenience foods.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All true.
Well, thank you for allowing us to virtually shake a rancher's hand. So I'd love to make it out to Lubbock sometime and meet y'all and see the happy cows. So when I'm out there, I'll give y'all a call. But thank you so much for what y'all do, and you just being huge advocates of clean eating, and clearly you're a testament to what that can kind of produce, and that is a long living, thriving life. So thank you all for the time today. We really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. We appreciate
Yes, sir.
it.
And we do
love
come
sharing
to
our story.
Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth.
Yeah, we'll come
Monthly.
by. Yep,
Monthly.
Yep,
Okay. Well, if
definitely.
you live in Austin, Dallas, Fort Worth, and you want some really good beef, you need to go to holycowbeef.com.
There
Thank
you
y'all
go.
so much.
There you go.
See y'all.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Enjoyed it.